Hello everybody, it's time for another episode of Hadley's History. This week's topic is the War of 1812. Now this is a war that generally most Americans don't know a lot about. They don't understand the geopolitics of the situation or what led up to it and even what the conclusion was. A lot of people think that, the Americans must have won that war. Au contraire, no, but it isn't exactly what you think. So today we're going to look at a little different aspects about it and recommend a couple of cool things. And first though, we're going to give you a Tippecanoe County fun fact. Did you know that the Battle of Tippecanoe, by many historian standards, is the spark that ignited the War of 1812? But looking on a small microcosm level at, say, the individual militiamen that were made up in this part of Indiana at the time, were actually still speaking French, even though it had been almost a century since the French had founded this area with Fort Ouiatenon in 1717. In fact, a Kentucky militiaman noted in his journal in coming into Indiana on the way to the Battle of Tippecanoe, noted that the majority of the Indiana militiamen that he had encountered still spoke French. So while the French influence had already kind of seemed to cease away, it was actually still pretty strong here, and continued to linger on for at least another 40-50 years, and still influences our culture to this day. And now it's time for the Artifact of the Week. Our Artifact of the Week is being presented by our special guest living historian, John Wickett. John does a lot of living history programs for us out at the Battle of Tippecanoe Battlefield and Museum. And you can often find him out there on a Saturday during a summer month, and I hope you come out and check his schedule so you can catch him in person. Now, John usually portrays the 4th United States Infantry as it was at the Battle of Tippecanoe. Here is a photograph of John and how he would look in his full 4th U.S. uniform. However, for this presentation, he's going to be in what we call our undress or fatigue uniform while he demonstrates something really cool. John, take it away.
This is John Wickett with the Tippecanoe Battlefield and Museum. I'm an interpreter there, and today I'm going to be talking about the flintlock musket. The flintlock musket was a replacement for earlier designs. The matchlock musket, developed in the 17th century, was a design which required the soldier to have a burning piece of lint stock attached to the musket with which to ignite the powder, a much more dangerous design. Later on, the snap lock or snap haunce was used, but the mechanism was much more intricate and delicate. Here you can see the flintlock musket next to a later design, the caplock musket of the Civil War era. With the caplock musket, a percussion cap is placed here, and when it's struck by the hammer, it sends a spark in to ignite the powder inside the barrel. By comparison, the flintlock musket holds a piece of flint in the jaws of the hammer for which it takes its name, and the flint strikes the hardened piece of steel, sending a shower of sparks into the pan, igniting the powder. When I pull the trigger, if you watch closely here, you'll see the sparks when the flint strikes the frizzen. The loading sequence would begin with the cartridge. Using this tail, the soldier would bite off the tail of the cartridge, exposing the gunpowder inside. Next, that powder would be poured into the pan. With the pan primed, the frizzen is closed over the powder, protecting it from moisture coming from outside. And now you can see the flintlock mechanism in action. As I bring this to full cock and pull the trigger, you'll see the hammer strike the frizzen and create the sparks, and then you'll see that puff of smoke as the powder ignites. Muzzle loading refers to the way the ammunition is loaded. Loose powder and ball would be placed into the muzzle and rammed home with the use of the ramrod. Carried inside of a heavy leather cartridge box to protect from weather, ammunition would be held in paper cartridges like this. In this case, wrapped in paper, the powder would be held in the base. Up at the tip would be the ammunition or the projectile itself. And there were 3 types of ammunition used in the smoothbore musket: a round ball, several pieces of buckshot, or a combination of round ball and buckshot known as buck and ball. The example we have today is the type common used in both the American Revolution and the War of 1812. This is a 69 caliber smoothbore muzzle-loading musket. With the pan charged, it's time to load the musket. First, the powder is poured down the barrel and then the rest of the cartridge is inserted with the lead ball or the bucking ball or the buckshot. The ramrod is then used to drive the cartridge all the way down to the breech. Now the musket is ready to fire. A good soldier could load and fire the musket at a pace of about 3 shots per minute. We've got the musket loaded now. Let's fire it. We'll come to full cock, and now it's ready.
Thanks, John. That was great. And now it's time for our recommended book of the week. Our recommended book of the week is The War of 1812, A Short History by Donald Hickey. Hickey has written widely on the War of 1812, but this little volume is excellent for the beginning student. It makes complex and confusing geopolitical issues easy to understand and moves along very quickly. As an introduction to the war, I think it is no better reference than this particular book. You can find this great book and many others on the War of 1812 at our Tippecanoe Battlefield Museum History Store. And you can even call there if you can't come in person and order the book directly over the phone. We hope you end up calling them and checking out what else they have there. It is a fantastic history store with lots of interesting books and other artifacts for sale. And now it's time for History According to Hollywood. The Buccaneer. This 1958 film starring Yul Brynner and Charlton Heston is actually a remake of the 1938 film of the same name starring Frederick March. Based on a true story, the film follows one of the last pirates or buccaneers to operate in the Gulf of Mexico, Jean Lafitte. The War of 1812 has been raging, and Washington, D.C. has just been sacked and burned by the British, and a British fleet carrying more than 16,000 men are on their way to New Orleans. General Andrew Jackson can barely muster 1,200 men to defend the city, and the key piece of real estate in the defense of New Orleans is the pirate island stronghold at the mouth of the Mississippi known as Balatariat. Jean Lafitte wants to help the American cause, but can he trust Jackson or the American forces who have tried to capture and kill him in the past? The fate of our new country could rely completely on whether or not a pirate named Lafitte helps the American cause for freedom. It's a fun movie, and while the incident really happened and is true, it does take some literary license and bends the truth one way or the other here and there for a dramatic effect. However, it is a real cool piece of history that a lot of people don't know about. The other only problem I have is Charlton Heston portrays Andrew Jackson in the film. However, he portrays him as an old man with solid white hair, which just wasn't the case. He was still a relatively young man at the Battle of New Orleans. However, I still will recommend this film highly, and you can pick it up at Amazon.com and be able to get it fairly quickly. Well, that's all the time we got this week, so I hope to see you next time for another episode of Hadley's History.